Hello and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi stream. And I have not set things up properly because I disappeared for a quick wee. Oh, we've lost Kriss. And
She's
Kriss is back.
Ah, my headset's being weird and it won't connect my microphone up for some reason.
Ah, well, that doesn't matter.
So I shall have to go now.
We'll take you any way we can get you, baby.
Hell yes.
Ah, dear. Right. So the stream is now live. That was the first trance mix I think I've done in about 5 years.
It was good. I was enjoying it.
Nice. Yeah, it's one of my favourite genres to listen to and to go raving to. 'Cause it's also pretty and airy and everything like that. But it's there's not enough to do when you're having a mix. I find it's very much I need to try and start this at the right point so it doesn't sound too shit when the other one finishes. Whereas when you're mixing like drum and bass or breakbeat or something like that, there's like how many tunes can I blend together to make a new tune sort of thing. I think I used to have fun doing sort of 4-deck mixes, which you can actually do off these turntables. It gets really confusing, but yeah, you're sort of cutting out frequencies in various tunes and making this whole other thing that sometimes sounds really good, sometimes sounds awful. But yeah, doing it with the old trance, there's less opportunity to make a blend of sounds unless you really, really plan a set. And I did one a few years back where I got into sort of like harmonic mixing a little bit. And there were ones where the outros of one tune would play really, really beautifully with the intro of another, and you'd get this sort of conversation piece going back and forth before the next one dropped in and stuff like that. But anyway, you're not here to have me blather on about mixing, are you? No.
Why not? Why not? It's more interesting than us.
Yeah.
So tonight we are here, sort of carrying on from last Tuesday's stream. And last Tuesday we were discussing morality, weren't we?
Yeah.
Usually.
And it sort of came up that we should probably have a discussion about moral particularism and value pluralism. So I suppose we should start with, what are those, Dave?
I don't know. I've never heard of either of them.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to delve into my good place memory then.
What do you expect? Do you think I've studied philosophy or something? Okay. I'll start with moral particularism because it's one that Kriss is interested in.
It very much is.
Yeah. Okay. So generally, when we think about morality, we think about principles. So when we think of somebody being a moral person, we think of them having a certain set of principles that are consistent and applied across the board. They might not necessarily be applied in a sort of cosmopolitan way, but they'll have a principle like it's not moral to lie to your friends. Some might go with it's not moral to lie in a sort of universalist sense, or there might be a generalist sense, which is it's not okay to lie to your friends, but it's okay to lie to other people. And those things will be applied consistently across the board. Moral particularism is a bit different. It argues that there is no moral principles, no consistent moral principles. It was first come up with by R.M. Hare. I think it was in the 50s or the 60s. And I think it's Jonathan Darch who mostly promotes it these days. And it's the idea that there are no universals, there are no general principles across the board, there are no general principles. We take each moment as it comes and we judge it based on the circumstances. We have basic ideas about morality that we learn through our life, that we come across in culture. And when we're greeted with a situation like somebody's stealing just because it's cool, we might say, well, stealing is wrong, especially in that scenario. But if we have a mother who's stealing to feed her baby, we might go, well, yes, she's broken the law, but has she really done anything wrong? I mean, there might have been other alleys, but maybe they weren't available to her at the time. We have to consider all the circumstances and judge then. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so, I mean, with that, you could still have an ultimate purpose to morality, but you realise, no, there is no ultimate purpose to it.
No.
Right.
Not in moral particularism. There are no moral principles, no moral guidelines, no moral absolutes. It's all intuitively based. Think of it in a sort of emotivist basis.
I was just going to say, is it like emotivism, but... right, okay. So, would you say moral particularism is, like emotivism, at least mostly subjective then?
Yes. But not subjective in the sense that it gets its truth from the personal opinion. It's just an opinion about what is right and wrong. We might all have sort of similar opinions, but they're guided by moral intuitions rather than any principles.
So there is... It's also sort of saying that there is no real right or wrong then, in that regard.
Not in that sort of sense, no. But we still judge actions as right or wrong. It's just the way we do it is, it's not based on any absolutes, any goals, any particular rules. It's based on how we feel about a particular situation.
Okay.
Whereas with deontology, we would have a specific set of rules to go back to, and with consequentialism, we would be able to go purely on the consequences. With particularism, you have to use both of those or neither of those to kind of find your way through to what you feel is the best result in any given situation.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, this is one of the things that I struggle with emotivism as well, and subjectivism, in the sense of how do we say something is right or wrong past with those theories? You know, like, I mean, subjectivism is the opinion is the truth maker. So in that regard, if someone decides it is moral to rape and torture babies, then subjectively they are correct because their opinion is the truth maker, and that's one of the problems with moral subjectivism. Emotivism is very similar in that regard, except it talks about the way people feel about the situation. But again, it's your emotional response to the situation. So therefore, under emotivism, if raping and torturing babies gave you enough pleasure, you'd say that it was a moral behavior. And again, I think that is something that would take all of us to go, no, fuck off. So under moral particularism, it sounds like it's open to the same issues.
Yeah, sort of. There is no moral truth in moral particularism, not in that sense. Like there is no, it is wrong in an absolute sense to do X. It's just that we have certain standards that our society goes by, which influence our moral intuitions. We have certain emotions, and we think of circumstances in particular ways, and that all goes to creating a moral judgment. And the more we practice these moral judgments, the kind of better we get at them. So if somebody decided, oh, well, yeah, it's okay to rape babies, you might challenge that and say, well, look, no, I don't think it is, because you're not bringing about any good, you're doing harm. The rest of society thinks that it's wrong. So those circumstances are just wrong to do.
With subjectivism and emotivism, was it? or
No,
emotionalism. Yeah, you both of those are relying purely on the individual's reaction and judgment, whereas particularism, although it's the individual making the balances and weights for it, it is accepting a wider moral structure.
Yeah, because it's generally one of the circumstances that you would take into account in moral particularism is a kind of relativism, a sort of cultural relativism, in that, well, in this country it's wrong, and even if you were to go to another country where it was right, you could say something like, well, I feel it's wrong because the rest of the world feels it's wrong, and you're doing X, Y, and Z. So I would say that there is no circumstances that kind of justify this as being a good action.
So, like the example with, say, countries that decide to kill atheists because their deontological rule set, a divine command theory, says that's fine. Under subjectivism, they would be fine to do that because it's their opinion that's the truth maker. Under emotivism, it would say that they feel they are right. So again, because they feel that they are in the right, they are, morally speaking. Under moral particularism, it would be more of an argument about the way the whole world sees this particular act. And see, this is the thing. How do you justify between them thinking it's right and someone else thinking it's wrong under moral particularism?
That's the difficult part. I mean, it's basically a guideline to help think of it as something like virtue ethics. It's not like virtue ethics in that there's virtues and stuff, but it's you practice at gaining a moral disposition. You practice it getting good. So in a circumstance where two groups kind of disagree, the only thing you could really do is hash it out and see who assess those circumstances and argue them out.
Would it be a fair thing to say that moral particularism would be more a set of ways to judge how you act as opposed to a set of ways to judge how other people act? It's more of an internal thing as opposed to a judgment on other people?
Yes and no, because it's also judging other people. But that's why I say it's sort of like virtue ethics in that it's sort of reasoning about your own behavior and then taking that outside of your own self and judging the actions of others. Like you might judge a junkie to be bad, but another person under moral particularism might say, well, look, he's got these circumstances. He's grown up abused. He needs a way to escape that abuse, the memories that come from it. So maybe you're judging him a bit harshly. And then that other person might take on those moral kind of arguments and intuitions and adjust their own kind of reasoning about it.
So it's a system which allows more of a discussion than deontology or consequentialism.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I do see what you mean by about the relation to virtue ethics in that way. Obviously, virtue ethics is essentially training yourself into virtuous behaviors and learning to judge situations, and eventually hoping it becomes an autonomous practice, so you don't have to think about, in this situation this is my behavior, in this situation this is my behavior. Eventually you'll get to the point where you are acting virtuously without even thinking about it. Under moral particularism, it's like virtue ethics light, because you're not comparing it to virtues, you're just comparing it to intuition, which, as you say, is similar to emotivism. And then the end result is who's got the best argument.
Yeah. And like I say, under particularism, there is no moral truth. So it's not like saying I'm right and you're wrong, or your behavior is objectively wrong. It's like, well, I feel it's bad. These are the reasons I think it's bad. Um, I wouldn't behave like that myself. I would hope you wouldn't behave like that. Here's the reasons why I think those particular circumstances are bad. I mean, the person might turn around and say, well, these are the reasons I think those particular circumstances are good. And like you say, all you can do then is hash it out.
Yeah.
Or avoid the person because they're a dick.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. Yeah, I struggle with anything that says that there isn't a moral truth of some kind somewhere. I don't think there's necessarily absolute or universal truths. I think that you can get objective truths that may differ from situation to situation. You know, you can have a contextually correct in this particular situation. It is wrong to steal, but in this situation, it's permissible. Even if it's not a moral action in itself, it's permissible. You're not being completely immoral by doing it because etc.
Basically, you go by general principles rather than universal principles.
Yeah, but
that wouldn't be particularism.
No, it wouldn't. No. Because as Dave was saying, sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, because you're using a particular set of principles to judge things by, and you apply those principles consistently, even if they're grounded in a more general approach. You might take the circumstance into account, but that's because your principles say, well, if the person is suffering and starving, then it's okay to steal because society hasn't helped them enough.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do think that there is. I mean, when you look through most moral theories, either as a first order or goal, or second or third order effect, you do seem to have this flourishing, human well-being at the heart of it somewhere. And I think that all morality sort of stems from flourishing and well-being, collaborative and cohesive societies. And we can judge things based on how well this represents it, which means that you can have different rules for different situations, like you might with moral particularism, but I would say that there is a truth about the situation rather than just an opinion or a intuition or a feeling about the situation.
Yeah. The thing is you could argue that those moral principles are what creates your moral intuition. You train that moral intuition by those principles, but you apply those principles consistently. So therefore, it's not just an intuition. Whereas in moral particularism, it would be, well, all the experiences I have lead me to judge this particular instance in this way.
But you're still, like you say, you're still using those principles, and they are what influence your intuition, but you're also being open to being persuaded otherwise, which is just reasonable, surely. Like, oh shit, I hadn't thought about it like that. So you can still have those principles in particularism.
Yeah, you can. It's just that you would argue that those principles don't apply consistently or across the board or to everybody in every culture. They're just the guiding sort of the things you feel that are right and wrong at that moment are what guide that intuition and what guide you to make that judgment as good or bad.
I suppose it also gets somewhat muddied depending on how broad your the word's just gone, principles are. If you have the principle of it's wrong to steal, it narrows it very, very much. If you have the principle that it's wrong to steal unless ABC, then it broadens that out a lot.
It does. It sort of helps to shape circumstances in a sense that you can both be more broad, like you say, But you don't particularly have to stick to that principle. You can say, well, look, it's wrong to steal. It's okay to steal if you're starving, but you've stolen from a starving person. So it's wrong. You just keep building and building on top of those various ideas. But you might not apply that same principle the next time you come across a starving person who's stolen from another starving person because you just don't like the guy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing, though. I think that, as I just mentioned, without some form of truth from the statements, I struggle with it. I do think that you can make a different judgment based on a situation, but I don't see how you can do it without some sort of ultimate goal to reference it against it just being an intuition. I mean, I can understand how people do it, but and as you say, that there is no right or wrong within it. We just had a question from the chat. 3 Rusty Nails. Hey, how you doing? Nice to have you here. Did I say that there's no absolute truth? No, that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about how, morally speaking, I don't think there's necessarily an absolute or universal rule set. I do believe in objective morality. I think morality is more complex than a simple subjective versus objective approach. I think there are definitely subjective elements to morality and relative elements. But I do think that we can make objective statements against what the purpose of morality is. Now, some people might argue that the purpose of morality is wholly subjective. I think looking at a number of different moral theories, you can see that there's generally this sort of flourishing and well-being sort of thing in there. So I think everyone that's thinking about morality is thinking along the same lines. So if the intuition going along the moral particularism route is it's about well-being and collaborative societies and flourishing as well, even under moral particularism, I think you could still technically make an objective statement. It's just saying that there is no truth there to be had. And I think that is the thing that is, difficult. Hello, white man. Thank you for saying that we're gay. I wish I was. I'm just not fabulous enough.
Sexualism for the win, baby.
But yeah, sorry, distracted there.
Yeah.
So yeah, in regards to saying there's no absolute truth, I mean, I'm speaking about morality, and maybe there will be a point where we do find an absolute truth to a couple of things, but I don't think there are necessarily absolute or universal moral truths. I think we can get to objective standards. I think that eventually, when we know enough, we might have correct objective standards. But I don't think that we will have an absolute rule set. It's one of the reasons that I struggle with deontology, where it's like stealing is wrong. That's it. Boom. And it's sort of with a lot of consequentialist moral theories, they're open to a number of different errors. By errors, I mean you could do something that is intuitively immoral, but under consequentialism, the result is good, so therefore it's considered moral. But
like we were talking about last week with the whole torturing for terrorists and saving millions of people.
Yeah.
Exactly. Intrigued Feline, an objective statement that holds no truth. Now, I'm not saying that there's no truth. I'm saying it's not an absolute truth. So if we're to use it, so if we compare something against flourishing and we're to compare a particular set of actions against whether it helps the human race flourish, we can say that this is true in this circumstance. But in another circumstance, the same action might not help us flourish. So therefore, it's not an absolute truth. It's not a universal truth. It's just a truth for this particular circumstance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, we could get onto theories of truth, and then we'd just be going off piste by a million miles, and we'd be here till next Tuesday.
It's true. I know it. I don't believe it. It's fine.
Yeah, I've been getting into a few conversations about knowledge recently and beliefs. Again, it's almost like it's all I ever do. Knowledge, beliefs, morality, and the definition of atheism.
That's why I try to introduce these new topics.
What,
Gives
morality?
us all something different. A different kind of morality.
I just like talking about torturing people.
That too. Not that I'm a serial killer or anything, and there's no bodies in my back garden, honest.
Not anymore.
What happened there? Sorry, everything crapped out for a second, although the stream's still on. Sorry. You're saying not anymore?
I haven't got bodies in my back garden anymore. I put them in a black bag, got the bus, and dumped them in the sea.
Hopefully not Llandudno Sea, though, because, I mean, it's very beautiful what they've done to sorting out all the pollution in the area.
Yeah, I'm afraid I polluted the sea.
Damn it. My buddy Jason's going to get on your case for that.
No, I haven't been to Llandudno for a while. I'm out in Junction rather than in Llandudno itself.
Yeah. It's nice around there, though, isn't it?
It is.
I've been saying to the wife that we need to head over there at some point and just do it. We've got so much on there. There's never time to do anything, and we're always so busy. Bastard lives.
Lockdown.
Yeah,
Sorry?
if you break the lockdown, I'll kill you.
Well, there is that too. I wasn't planning on doing it through lockdown. But maybe
Well, just to bring it back to the topic, there could be particular circumstances where it's moral to break the lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, we even addressed that. Was that Tuesday or Thursday last week? It was Tuesday, wasn't it? We had Bearded Heretic ask the question about the protests in London, and I got confused about the protests against the lockdowns versus the Sarah Evershed ones, and compelling arguments were made that actually in that circumstance that they should have done it, and I think you guys managed to convince me that actually it was the right course of action, because the circumstances that led to it and have been leading to it for so many years actually just went, do you know what? And it's highlighted it to a number of people who were not in the right frame of mind before, I think, as well, that there is actually a problem that people don't see. I think three of us see the problem that is there, and it's almost hard to see why people don't see that there's a problem, and it sucks that it has to come to a point where people are protesting and getting their heads kicked in for these sort of things to actually get noticed and things like that. But yeah, I agree with you.
You're a moral particularist now.
Yep.
No, I think
Moral
it was
particularism
wrong.
for the win.
I mean, we've also got the protests that happened yesterday, I believe, wasn't it?
The ones against
where the police car was set on fire. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, no, that was a few days
I knew
ago.
the protest happened, but not the cop car.
Yesterday was against lockdown. A couple of days ago was Kill Bill, which was...
I thought it was yesterday, but yeah.
No, do you know what? You could be right. My sense of time is fucked.
Yeah, same. But yeah, because of the bill being presented to be able to basically put people in prison for 10 years if they protest.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. I mean, to be honest, the bill isn't in its final draft yet. It's still very rough, but it needs to be really considered. And yeah, that's what I mean by it, like thrown out. because if you can't
But yeah, as a
protest,
general rule, I would say it's wrong to set police cars on fire. But in this particular circumstance, if that's what it fucking takes to stop shit like this from going through, then fuck it, yay arson.
yeah,
Yeah, be careful. Because there was somebody arrested yesterday for posting on Facebook, uh, complaining about the police, and she was accused of harassment or something.
I really,
Yeah, that's proof that the bill needs to be scrapped.
Yeah.
Yes, far too authoritarian. Yeah, we're getting into a state where we're not going to be in a democracy. I mean, I don't feel that we're in a proper democracy anyway. I haven't felt that way for years. That's why I used to spoil my ballot, because I felt that it wasn't going to make a difference no matter what I did anyway. But I don't know, man. I think this country's so fucked and getting worse.
Yeah.
The fact that Brexit went through, I mean, I at the time I was like, I don't know what the right thing is. There's so much information coming from every side, and I must admit, I was one of the people that was just like, I don't actually know what's better. And hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think that there is so many issues with absolutely everything that's going on in this country and around the rest of the world. But I mean, all three of us are pretty much focused on what's going on in this country at the moment. We kind of need to be, because it's fucked.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can't wait to move away.
But you see,
Seems I picked the wrong fucking.
Sorry, Chris.
I was saying, it seems I picked the wrong fucking year to come out as trans. Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
unfortunately. It is good evidence of why ethics needs to be taught in school as part of some kind of social instruction type class or something. Maybe not philosophy, but like a social studies kind of class.
Well, there seems to be some degree of philosophy and ethics being taught in secondary school now. Unfortunately, it is a part of the religious education lessons, but I mean, better somewhere than nowhere, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why Kieran is currently interested, sat upstairs listening.
Nice one.
No, it's good. I mean, we've done lots of podcasts and videos on morality throughout our playlist. We should actually sort out our playlist on YouTube to link all the videos under particular headings as well. And there's a couple of people that I've been watching on YouTube recently that Opie linked me to. Was it Kriss, Gary, or something like that? Gary was somewhere in the name, I'm sure. Opie, if you're still there, I know you said you had to duck out, but
Gary Edwards.
Gary Edwards, that's him. Thank you. He's definitely worth checking out as well. If you're into watching, he does quite concise little videos as well. So if you're someone that doesn't have more than 5 to 10 minutes to sort of spare, you can break it up into little chunks and go, I'm just going to watch this one right now, right on to the next one. So it's good. Yes, I'd love to go to Australia, but that's ultimately where the wife wants us to end up in the future. We even started the ball rolling on things a little while ago to get stuff sorted, but we've decided to stay in the country until the kids are a little bit older, and then we might consider a move out there in the future. Who knows? I'd just be set. I'd be happy with somewhere equatorial. If I could get decent internet and decent work in Tenerife, that's me sorted for life, man. I like a cheap and cheerful holiday, and that would be a cheap and cheerful life, man.
Australia is too hot, has too little ozone layer, and there are far too many things that want to kill you all the time.
I think I'd go New Zealand, personally.
Yeah, New Zealand's better.
Yeah, it's like the UK version of Australia.
Yeah. And their response to things like COVID have just been largely amazing.
Yeah, my brother-in-law has been out there through the whole pandemic, And we've got friends out there as well. And I mean, they're going to gigs and things and festivals and all of that because they just dealt with it so well. The second there was a case, they're like, right, lockdown for at least another 2 weeks, maybe 4. But it's one case, and you're like, yep, we're locking it down. We're locking it the fuck down. And you're just like, but one case. And that's over here. We're like, oh yeah, it's only a few thousand a day. So economy. Look at our economy compared to maybe the New Zealand one at the moment. That's actually, through having these intense, hardcore lockdowns, a couple of them, has been able to get everything working again over the last year. And we're still stuck in a lockdown. And there's thoughts that it might be extended again. And we've just had a further extension to the travel ban and things like that. So, You're back, OP. It's good to have you back, but you missed the question I asked you, and Dave answered it anyway.
About Gary Newman and feeling safe in your car.
The Fear Factory version of that is awesome, especially with the fact that Gary Newman is in that one.
Check that out. You should also check out some of his called Rip, which is weird industrial metal. It's amazing.
Ah, interesting. I do like a bit of industrial. What was it? No, it was. I'll tell you what, OP. I'm going to tell you the answer, and you can guess the question. The answer was Gary Edwards. So, realistically, with moral particularism, there's no real moral truths. So in comparison to subjectivism, the moral truth comes from an opinion. With emotivism, the truth comes from the way you feel about a situation. With particularism, they're saying there's no truth, but there is a lot of discussion to be had on it, and ultimately it comes down to someone with the better argument, and you would probably be applying your own principles to it, even though there aren't any principles for it. Is that about right, Dave?
Sort of. With emotivism, you could argue that there are no moral truths either, because morality is simply our emotional response to a particular thing. If it makes us happy, we consider it moral. If it makes us sad, we usually consider it immoral, or causes disgust.
Are there people who actually promote emotivism as a valid model?
David Hume,
yeah. There's quite a few that promote emotivism.
Surely the existence of sadists disproves that as a valid moral theory.
Yeah. There are those who would argue that morality isn't normative, it's responsive. So it's not how we should, how we ought to behave, it's just how we judge behavior.
So in some respects, it's an afterthought. So if I was to talk to Kriss and Kriss didn't like it, then she and I would have to say that it was immoral. Flip side, if you liked it, Kriss, then it would be moral under emotivism.
The act of talking to me wouldn't be judged as moral before you did so.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I suppose unless you had something where you said, "I don't want anyone to do this to me," in front of the situation. So therefore, I would know in front of the situation that this would be something considered bad.
But you could take it to a more extreme example and be like, instead of talking, which is somewhat of an amoral act in it of itself, stabbing someone. If I stabbed you and you liked it, then according to emotivism, it was fine. Even though stabbing people is largely agreed upon to be a bad thing.
Yeah. And like you said, other people might find it bad. So when they see it, they would judge it as an immoral action. Even if you both enjoyed stabbing each other, to somebody else, they would feel it was immoral. To somebody, there is no truth to it. It's just a reaction
Individual.
to the situation. Yeah.
So a couple of comments from the chat. Intrigued Feline says, though, be wary for an appeal to emotion fallacy when you are basing something on feelings. Not that it on itself is bad to use, but it can end up fallacious. I think that's one of the biggest issues I have with emotivism, is the fact that it is essentially just an appeal to emotion.
If you're not making an argument that it's wrong because you feel it's wrong, and it's just, well, I just feel it's wrong. I mean, that could be the thing. Morality could just simply be an emotive response. You have Mackie who argues something like, we make statements and propositions about morality, and we might say it is wrong to steal.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like a proposition, and we might assess it like a proposition, but in actual fact, we're making an error when we judge it like that. Because when somebody says it's wrong to steal, what they're actually saying is, I feel it's wrong to steal.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Which goes...
Sorry.
So which goes against the ideas of like deontology.
Yeah.
But you are, in a deontological sense, if you say it's wrong to steal, you are actually saying, no, it's wrong, not just I feel.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. You're making a truth statement. A truth statement.
So, Three Rusty Nails has a question saying, so morality is both subjective and objective. The short answer is yes. The longer answer, which you're going to get, is descriptively speaking, as in the way it works out in the world, it's a combination of subjective, relative, and objective statements. There are people with deontological rule sets, whether that's divine command theory or it's gone Kantianism, that's the one, or a different deontological set that they're working against. They have an objective standard, but you could say that there is a subjective element to it. People who might choose a particular consequentialist moral theory, you could say that there's a subjective element to the choice that they've made, but the normative ethical theory is still objective in and of itself. If you
the way I address it, the way I tend to sum it up, which I think we've gone over before ourselves, is that there can be objective truths in different moral structures, in different moral theories. Things can be objectively good and objectively bad. But as morality descriptively works in the real world, you do have to make a choice as to what moral theory you go by, which does make objective frameworks on a subjective foundation.
Exactly. And if we take it back to what I feel the purpose of morality is, which is human flourishing and well-being, and it does seem to be represented in people who are much brighter than me, that it's either a first order goal or at least a second or third order effect of their particular moral theory, that flourishing and well-being and building a collaborative and cohesive society and all of that sort of stuff does seem to be what morality is about. We can make objective statements against that. And we can even do it in the sense that in this situation it's that, and in this situation we shouldn't do that, and so on and so forth. But even still, there can be an argument that someone says, well, that's not what I think morality is about. So in practice, I think that as in descriptively about how it works in the world, it's definitely not completely objective. Now, a normative ethical theory is objective. The choice might not be which one you're doing. And morality, at least normatively speaking, does seem to be objective, with maybe a few subjective elements to it. And I think at some point we might have enough knowledge about morality and the way things work to actually attain an objective standard, that like a normative objective standard that perhaps is even correct, and that we can actually say, no, this is what it is. But we're not there yet.
I don't think we ever will be.
It's hard to know.
That's part of the discussions going on in sort of meta ethics. Discussions not about moral theory, but about morality itself. Is it objective? Is there a purpose? Is there a normative standard that one size fits all? Those are all sort of meta ethical discussions, and it's far from actually being close to being resolved.
And considering we've been talking about this for nearly 10,000 years, it probably won't be.
No. If we'd have stuck to religion, it probably would have been.
Yeah.
Because it's God says so and so. Morals come from God. Therefore, there is only one normative standard, and that comes from God. But in
unless
reality,
a new religion comes along.
Yeah, but then they just killed out new religion. Subsume it into their own set, or argue that their God is wrong. You know, that kind of thing.
I think of any examples, no.
No, Islam wasn't anything like that. No. But yeah, it's like you say. I'm not sure that there ever will be any sort of conclusion on that, because it's like Mackie says, maybe we're looking at it wrong and we're discussing it in terms of truths, but they're not actually truths. It's like a combination of emotivism and normativity and that kind of thing.
And society develops as well in what we are capable of doing as individuals. So those individual things which might have been normatively agreeable on when life was far simpler, there's going to be further and further exceptions and branches and things. And
yeah. Oh no, definitely. I mean, that's the thing. Like that's why I think you can have an objective standard, but obviously objective other than that's why you can't have an absolute or universal standard, because life changes so much in and of itself. I mean, you could think about things like eugenics, the way it used to work, in comparison to an ideological version of eugenics, and actually you could have a version of it that could be ethical. I mean, I know that I'm probably have caused a number of people to turn off now, but I think that you could have. Let's leave eugenics.
I've argued for this several times in the past, but I'm really enjoying watching you paint yourself into a corner, so I'm not helping.
Yeah, so I'm stepping back and I'm going to go cloning. Let's think about how cloning used to work to how cloning could potentially work in the future. We could have an ethical version of it. One of the biggest issues with cloning is all the deformities and things like that. But if we actually got to a point where there was no harm caused to any of the creatures we happened to be cloning, we could actually just say, well, actually, we're just repopulating a particular species through the last 10 of it, and we're multiplying that 10, and there's no negative effect. So actually, we're not doing any harm. We're actually doing some form of good. You know,
there's questions like that in ethics. The morality of cloning, the morality of genetically designing our children once the technology becomes available. There is a lot of discussion like that goes on in ethics.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be. And maybe there is, like we were saying, there is an answer that is that has a truth for the time, but that is what we're saying is for the time it holds that truth. But it doesn't mean that change the context and actually there's a different truth available. Equally, I do think there are certain things that we can look back on and say, no, they were never right. For example, slavery is one of the big ones that I think that no matter what lens you put it through and what arguments that you can make for it, I mean, I know positives have come out of slavery, but ultimately slavery is wrong.
Yeah. You'd be talking about something like moral epistemology then. Whether knowledge is possible, can we obtain it? What does it mean to have moral knowledge? And you can also discuss morality in terms of ontology. So it's a part of the fabric of the universe. I'm not sure that there is moral ontology as such, just moral epistemology.
Sounds interesting. Sounds like something we need to cover off, and sounds like something I need to go away and look into more before trying to hold a conversation on.
I'm sorry to bring up all these new ideas.
I need to look at what the actual words mean, let alone what the theories mean. Jesus Christ.
Moral means ontology. Basically you need more Al's in your life, basically. So
yeah,
you need someone to call you Betty.
We need more Al Bundy.
Not Ted Bundy.
No, Al Bundy. They're sort of similar, but one's a little more extreme in that age of women.
Bundy was pressure.
So, carrying on with the chat, sorry, before we move on to value pluralism, Intrigued Feline says, I think a good subject would be euthanasia. Some would think it's immoral because it leads to death, but some other would think it would be moral because it alleviates suffering. Now, I think under the way I see morality, I completely agree with you. I think under moral particularism as well, that would be an agreement there. I think under some deontological rule sets, especially divine command theory and Kantianism, if I'm correct on that one, you can tell me if I'm not, it would say that actually, no, it's never a moral action. Although you'd get a bit confused under Kantianism because there would be certain duties conflicting each other there. Whereas under divine command theory, it's a little bit more black and white.
Yeah, only God has the right to take a life.
Yeah,
that's it under divine command theory.
Unless it's written in the book that you're allowed to take their life for a particular reason.
Yeah. I was going to say, unless God commands that. Yeah.
Don't you mock that bald person, or you shall be stoned to death. Really?
No, bears will rip you apart.
Yeah, I
know. Three Rusty Nails. Sorry, you say that you're confused. Can you elaborate on what you're confused on? I think it might be in your question about subjective versus objective. So if I was to answer that and about how that they're descriptively speaking. So when we speak descriptively, we're talking about ises, the way it works in the world. So the way it works in the world is there are different cultures with different standards. So moral relativism is how it works in the world. Essentially, it's what people believe is right and wrong, regardless of what actually is right or wrong. If we speak about normatively, we're talking about what actually is right or wrong, rather than what people believe is right or wrong.
What we ought to think of as right and wrong, as opposed to what we do.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, that's how we're going. Oh, you're not confused anymore anyway. Sorry about that. I'm just catching up with the chat.
So, about Opie mentioning the ethics of reintroducing extinct species, I'm pretty sure there's an entire film series specifically demonstrating why that's a terrible fucking idea.
Yeah, you might be right there.
I mean, I would pay a lot of someone else's money to go and see some dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I'm just going to check the weather forecast first, and if there's storms, fuck no.
Or if there's a fat guy wanting to sell secrets.
Either either.
Isn't there always a fat guy?
Yeah, there always is. Usually me.
Hey, you sell them for free on this stream.
Yeah, true. But they're
I
not
charge-
secrets.
Why I charge you a premium rate when I tell you my secrets, so you can't make any profit on them later on.
All my information comes from the Stanford Encyclopedia, and I believe that morality is just an imposition of will.
That dictionary again.
Yeah, as Intrigue Feline says, don't reintroduce 14th century bubonic plague.
I think he already did. It's not coronavirus. It's OP poisoning the planet.
A modified bubonic
Yep.
plague. Clever Thunderstorm Flesh That Thinks, aka Computer Brain, says, is it good because God says it good, or does God say it's good because it's good? I think Dark Matter 2525 did a good video on that one.
That comes from old.
Eurithropro.
That's yes.
Yeah, Sam Harris kind of rephrased it as well, and it's quite a common one when discussing divine command theory.
The problem of piety or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I do remember some things.
It's more than I do.
Same here.
I have to wing every conversation and hope that knowledge comes to me.
I've not been on enough of these streams for people to really know me. I'm the token idiot.
And
don't
you're
get
used to the
about
couple
it,
of
really.
idiots here.
I never know what I'm talking about. I just use a lot of big words and hope people get baffled.
And I just agree with what Dave says and hope people think I'm smart for agreeing with him. So in answer to that, yeah. The question goes into, I mean, that sort of question goes into so many different levels of the fact that they say that if we're talking about the Abrahamic deity, is the fact that God can't do anything wrong, so therefore anything he does is good. So him committing mass genocide is good because he did it. So on that result, you say it's good because God did it, because God can only do good things. Then of course you're contradicting omnipotence there, because you're saying he can't do a bad thing.
Well, there's also the flip side. Oh, sorry, Chris.
I was just going to say, it's some really kind of handy circular reasoning to automatically make your beliefs correct, isn't it?
Yeah. The flip side to that one is that there are those theists that would argue that God wouldn't command genocide because it's not a good thing. God can only do good things, and it's in his nature to only do good things. He sets the standard for what's good, but it comes from his intrinsic nature. But then you're sort of arguing that there's a standard outside of God that is what is good.
And you're also arguing against things like the global flood, which was genocide.
Yeah.
And the commanding of oh God, who was it that he ordered to be killed? He ordered a couple of genocides, didn't he, in the Bible?
Yeah, Sodom and Gomorrah.
No, he ordered the Jewish people to actually.
Oh, right, I see what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, to go out and kill entire tribes because they were eating their babies and sacrificing children and that kind of stuff.
Oh, they were atheists, were they?
No, just believed in the wrong God.
So yeah, I mean, if we to get into a conversation about divine command theory, it's so rife with a number of issues, and you'd have to focus on a particular doctrine of a particular sect of a particular religion, and and even then it's still quite convoluted. I think it's safe to say that there's enough issues with especially the major religious moralities, that it's worth not considering them seriously unless we're doing a stream specifically on those particular moralities. OP says reintroduction of mammoths in Siberia would recompact the permafrost so it is not melting. Interesting. And IF responds saying, okay, generally when people talk about genetic salvaging or reintroduction of extinct species, it's talking about non-hominids. But imagine this. What if we reintroduce the Neanderthals? Oh, we've got a few still hanging around. I think Eddie Izzard's like 11% Neanderthal.
Boris Johnson is 100%.
Who, sorry?
Boris Johnson.
I would be rather concerned that if any government allowed the reintroduction of Neanderthals, it would be specifically with the intent of classing them as non-humans and creating them as a workforce.
I think the same thing.
Yeah, if not a workforce, replacement organs.
Okay, now I'm on board.
Yeah.
I need a new pancreas, and this liver's not got long left.
I could do with a better back.
Yeah, I would like a nice set of tits. Mine aren't quite there yet, you know.
Give it 10 years and a lot of pizza. Or gluten-free food. That's what does it for me.
Yeah, actually, I must admit, I mean, because Katie's gluten-free, a lot of the gluten-free substitutes we have, I find I feel very inflamed by. I feel like I swell up by it. And it's
There's a lot more fat.
Yeah, it's really weird.
And a lot more sugar.
So are you sure you're not just mistaking it because wasps are gluten-free?
I tell you what, I do think that there is a big chance that we will all be moving to eating more insects unless they move forward with lab-grown meat at a more rapid rate than they have been in the last year or so.
I think we will be anyway, to be fair, just because of how cheap it is. You can already buy online a lot of like insect flour and protein powders, and I think it's just a smart thing to do. I'm not going to sit down and start munching on crickets by the handful, but if it's a crushed up ingredient, I mean, red colouring in some foods are crushed up insects as it is already. So
yeah. Interesting. I mean, a question for the audience though: lab-grown meat. If there was one human that you could have meat lab grown off of one of their cells from, and you could taste what they taste like, who would it be and why? Do you either of you have an answer for that?
Are we going by the idea that different people taste different, are we?
Well, they might. We don't know. How many people have you eaten?
Who's a famous vegan? Because I know grass-fed cows taste good.
Yeah, but that's just it. I mean, there could be a variety of states. If you spend most of your week eating, I don't know, curry, do you taste more that way than if you spend your week eating mangoes? I don't know why they're the two things in my head right now.
Did you have curry and mango today?
I haven't had mango in a while, actually. I love my mango, but I did have curry today.
There we go.
I have curry quite often.
You have just proved determinism true. Your curry determined your thought tonight.
But I haven't had mango in ages, so how did that happen?
Yeah, but you're craving mango, so that determined your other choice.
Am I? Oh, I need to go have a mango. Sorry, stream over. I need to go eat mango.
It's a desire that's deep within your subconscious that came out when you thought about food.
Fair enough.
I'm just seeing in the chat an intrigued feline saying, I've only eaten one person in my life, myself. Just some skin here and there, or a fingernail by accident. I hope you mean a bit of a fingernail, Because I'm curious how you eat a whole one by accident.
I think when people talk about eating a fingernail, they're talking about the bit on the end, though, that comes off, aren't they? They're not talking about a
Just
whole
accidentally
fingernail.
ripped it off with a pair of pliers. Oh, shit.
Oh, it fell in my mouth. Oh, how did that happen?
Cheaper than nachos.
To be fair, as a kid, I used to love it when I'd get really burnt and I'd peel it off and I'd peel off the longest strand possible, and then I would
I think
eat
I
it.
hate you. Yeah, I hate you.
We knew that anyway, didn't we?
Yeah. You sure it was just kale you got me to eat when I was staying at your house?
Yes, I wouldn't ever feed anyone anything I didn't tell them of, as much as it tempts me to be a complete arse. If it's not something that they would normally eat. Now, there might be a time where, for example, I know you might eat turkey and I might make a chili, but I'd use turkey mince instead of beef mince, for example. I'd say that was an acceptable, hey, did you recognise that it wasn't beef? But I wouldn't ever make you eat, me. Unless you wanted to. Again.
German cannibals, here we come.
It's kinky as fuck, is it, Leon? Is it? Kieran says Elvis Presley, just to say I did. He also asked a question a little while ago saying, so is God like the only morally right murderer? So the thing there is it wouldn't technically be murder from God. Murder is a premeditated, unlawful killing of a human. So if God commands it, it's completely lawful because God supersedes any sort of laws. God's law is the law. There could potentially be an argument where he says you should obey the laws of the state, and so on and so forth. But ultimately speaking, it wouldn't be murder. But is God the only morally right killer? If God commands you to kill, then that is... But essentially, the command to kill has to come from God. If there isn't a command to kill from God, then there is no moral rightness. I mean, under divine command theory. Sorry, Chris.
Even in like a case of self-defense?
Well, what does it say under divine command theory about self-defense?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm lacking on that knowledge as well, but I think that there is something in there. It isn't talking directly about self-defense, but it's talking about defending yourself against attackers. It's speaking more tribally. Although I'm not sure if I'm conflating the Bible with the Quran here.
The Quran does have a verse about that.
So maybe it is the Quran I'm thinking of then. Same God though, so much of a muchness. I know Christians would disagree, but they're wrong about a lot of things. Let them be wrong about this too. Sorry. I'm not sorry.
The answer to your question, does it have to be a clone? Because if it's not, David Wolf.
You just want to eat David Wolf.
Yeah.
It would make the world a better place.
It would make the world a little place. No, I'm just thinking about saying if they could produce a lab-grown steak, for example, or a lab-grown mince of the person, who do you think would taste the best and why?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Kieran. I'm going with Elvis. That way, we've only got to deal with one set of postage and packaging as well. Same house.
And plus, Elvis is already full of burgers, so it's like
Yeah.
meat.
You'd make a good burger out of Elvis. Yeah. Be a lot of fat there to melt away and just leave a very tasty bit of meat. I'm not actually sure who I'd say. I didn't even think about the question before I asked it, so I don't actually have an answer. I don't even have a good response. So, Dave, do you have one?
No.
Okay. I'm going to say Opie says Steve McRae. He didn't say that at all, but I'm going to pretend he did. And Intrigue Feline says at the moment she'd choose me because I'm filled to the brim with alcoholics. Yeah, I am basted. I'm definitely basted. One might even say marinated. Whilst I pour myself a drink, we need to consider that we've covered off moral particularism, and we've discussed throughout it a little bit of moral subjectivism and moral emotivism, and there's definite issues, especially with subjectivism and emotivism. Particularism seems like virtue ethics light. I mean, that's a really simplistic way to put it, but I like making things as simple as possible because I'm a very simply brained person. So I need shit dumbed down. So hopefully my dumbing down helps you understand as well, or at least makes you go, "What a fucking idiot," and you can laugh at me. Winner, winner.
So, as opposed to virtue ethics light, which I agree with to an extent, it's virtue ethics with more of a discussion from two different possible positions.
And less virtue.
Eventually, depending on whether that is your instinct or your intuition to go with what is virtuous.
Apparently, drinking whiskey from a glass is country. Do you mean I have to drink it from a bottle? Because, I mean, I will if I really have to, but I prefer to have it from a glass. It's a nice glass. My brother bought me these like 3 years ago.
You need a straw.
Straw. Whiskey. Strawpedo the bottle. Yeah. When I finally move and lockdown is finally over and this pandemic is over, I think we should actually all have a bottle of bourbon each and see who can strawpedo the most.
I'll go with vodka personally, but yeah, bye.
Yeah, a bottle of whatever.
Orange squash bin.
Although oddly, Kriss, I'm going to be, even though I'm moving to the left by about an hour and a half, I'm still 2 hours away from you. So we're exactly the same distance away. And actually, Dave, even though I'm geographically closer to you, I'm actually living further away from you travel time. Fucking roads in this country.
Yep. Dave and I might be getting the hint here.
No, you're right. There's nothing wrong with country. It's not my favourite genre, I must admit. But I wouldn't say I actually hate it as much as I'm supposed to.
I prefer it to drum and bass.
Oh, God. Get out. But thankfully, music taste is completely subjective and there is no real right or wrong answer. Apart from all the Minecraft covers, they're objectively shite. Red wine and a big thick steak. Oh yeah, that's like my favorite. I actually had a bottle of wine downstairs that I was going to open, and then I didn't. But wine and steak. I actually made a beautiful red wine sort of gravy the other day that was like really thick. That was basically a steak topper the other day, which I had with a glass of red wine. the butchers, like the mobile butchers and all that, are closed at the moment because of lockdown, and they had like the best quality steaks for the lowest price ever.
Sorry,
What have I missed?
I just saw Kieran. He's changed his answer to the meat question to Harambe. I
Kieran,
might have to have words with you, Bubble.
I kind of love you. If you need to get away from Kristen for a while, you know, you can always chill with us. It's a long old trek, but you know, we'll look after you.
Get walking.
And feed you Harambe. And kale. You'll have to eat kale with your Harambe. IF, you are correct. UK country roads are the worst. They definitely are. Sometimes, actually, there is no speed limit on the road. I mean, I say there's no speed limits. It's like 60 miles an hour sort of speed limit, the national speed limit. And they're so tight and windy, and they're so, like, they're basically one car can fit down, but they're two-way roads. And you've got cars going, like, super fast both directions, and you're just like, why? Why? No. Oh, Leon likes the Minecraft covers. I'll introduce you to my son. You'll hit it off well. Computer brain, red wine reduction. Yeah, so as in when you're boiling something, so there was a lot of red wine to start with a bit of balsamic olive oil, and then you let that cook a little bit, and you add the red wine, and you let that reduce a little bit, and then you add some beef stock, and then you let that reduce a little bit. That's what I mean by the red wine reducing. Okay, Leon, you say they're objectively cringe. Thank you. I thought we were going to have to fight for a second there. Right, so I think that you're right, you let it simmer. Yes, I know, but shh. I think we've covered moral particularism quite well. Do we need to cover off value pluralism as well? And how is that in any way different to moral particularism?
Okay, value pluralism is sort of a different idea. It's the idea that when it comes to making moral judgments, there are different values that affect the actual judgment, and there are different sort of normative theories that we use to come to the conclusion. And the way we assess an action, we do multiple passes of it. But there are certain values that might take precedence over others. So sort of, we might have a value like it's wrong to break the promise. And imagine we promise our kid that we're going to go to the film. We're going to go to the cinema and watch a film with them. And something comes along and we end up having a job interview. Now, we might value that better job because it can bring about a better life for, you and the family. So we might say that value takes precedence over breaking a promise. But in the way that we judge it, we've still done something wrong by breaking the promise. It's just that we've gone with a higher value, and the action guiding principle was right, but we're still wrong to break a promise. We make several passes of an action or a statement.
So this is like how we were talking last week with the problem of dirty hands, where we were talking about how torture is something that we generally see is wrong. And if we were to torture... So, sorry, if you didn't catch last week's stream, there was a scenario where there was someone who had...
There was a thought experiment. There was not a scenario where this happened.
Oh, okay. There was a thought experiment, And in the thought experiment, the scenario was
Joe made a bomb.
So a gentleman, shall we say, who wasn't very gentle, made a bomb and planted it somewhere in this city. And this bomb would wipe out 1,000 people. These people were generally innocent of the situation. It's a number of men, women, children, etc. And you can torture this particular person. And in this instance, torture will work. Do you torture the person? Is it morally right or wrong? And we looked at it through different lenses, and we're like, within consequentialism, it's only the consequences that matter. So therefore, there's no problem of dirty hands there. But under different ethical theories, there are different ways you can describe that. Actually, maybe you shouldn't do that, but then the result is worse than not doing that. So you should do the wrong thing to have a better outcome. We then went down the path of, okay, so let's forget for a second torturing him. Let's say torturing him wouldn't work, but he had a daughter or 5 daughters, and torturing them and killing one of them would make that person then talk, and you'd then save 1 million people, including a number of different innocents of men, women, children, etc. I think that it was generally agreed that torture is one of those things that is always wrong, especially with the fact that it usually doesn't work. But that aside, torture is one of those things that we feel is wrong, especially when you're torturing an innocent like the daughter. There is less compassion for the person that set the bomb than his daughter, who is 5 years old and completely innocent of the situation, has no clue what's going on. But equally, one innocent versus however many innocents there are in the city, in this instance it was 1 million, seems to be the better option. So with value pluralism, what you're saying is that we can say, even if we objectively say torture is wrong, we can say that even though torture is wrong, saving 1 million people is better. Is that basically right?
Yeah. It's basically the idea that when we judge an action, we will look at both the duties that are broken and the consequences of the action, and we will look at the principles that should guide our actions. So our duty to protect 1 million people, that would be our action guiding principle. But we also look at it from another angle, where what duties did we break in order to get to those consequences? And we might say, well, we had to torture that person, and we have a duty to protect our prisoners. Or in the case of torturing the terrorist children, we have a duty not to punish the innocent for the crimes of others. And
yeah, you mentioned there, it's something I was going to ask as well, because of what we were talking about last week. You mentioned the idea of somebody from a purely deontological perspective freezing and not doing anything due to conflicting duties.
yeah.
So value pluralism would be a way to address that. So would a deontologist be able to use value pluralism to put different weights on different duties?
It depends on the type of deontologist. But they would only look at it from the deontological perspective, where they might say that certain duties are more urgent,
necessary.
Than duties. Yeah. And so they might say, well, our duty to protect these 1 million people is greater than our duty to not do such and such.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't strictly be value pluralism. That would just be weighted duties. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Because the value pluralist would look at the consequences as well. They would look at all the different values in making that sort of judgment. So they might also look at it, well, this would make a bunch of people feel bad, so we shouldn't do it.
So that you've answered my next question there. So essentially, a value pluralist wouldn't just look at a deontological rule set. So a deontologist might weight their rules and obligations, but that wouldn't necessarily be value pluralism. Value pluralism would be looking at the deontological rule set, which may already be weighted anyway, but also comparing it to the consequences of the action. Is there any virtue tied into value pluralism, though?
Yeah, because virtue is a value, you could include that in the way that we judge the action. So you could say that the person was not being virtuous in this instance, but they were guided by principles that meant that being virtuous. Think of the scenario where I said about getting food through in a war-torn area. It wouldn't be virtuous to bribe the people, to bribe the warlords, but you want to feed those people. The consequences of getting those people fed is greater than is a greater value than not being corrupted.
What measures are used?
1 second,
to...
just in case
Sorry?
folks haven't heard that one. So that was another example from last week. So you're trying to get food to a poverty-stricken country with a load of folks, but there are essentially militia, gangs, etc. around. And in a particular zone, you are trying to get food to them. But if you drop off the food directly, the gang, the ruling party in the area, will jump in. They might attack you, but they'll definitely steal all the food. But if you choose to pay this gang off, say give them 10%, 20%, whatever, they will allow the rest of your food and medicine, etc., to be dropped off to the people. So even though you're doing something wrong by paying off a militia, you're doing something for the greater good by giving people who would get nothing otherwise and are struggling. So carry on with your questions. I just felt that they might need to know that.
Yeah. Now, I was just asking, so in that kind of situation, what measures do you use to attach value to the different things? What makes one more valuable than another? And because to me, that sounds like it would be intuition, which would make this kind of synonymous with particularism.
Yes, an intuition could guide it. It could be the different moral theories give sort of weight to the values. The difference between moral intuition, moral particularism, and value pluralism would be that you have these guiding principles. You have guiding principles from duties, from consequences. So you might be a weak consequence.
But you also agreed that you would still have those principles as part of your, or could have those principles as part of what creates your intuition in particularism.
Yeah, but in value pluralism, these would apply generally in each scenario.
So it's more that there's an overlap than
Yeah.
they become. Cool.
Yeah.
That's why I say moral particularism is sort of similar to value pluralism, but it's not value pluralism. It has certain similarities and familial resemblances, but in value pluralism, you would apply these moral principles in a common way and in a manner of regularity.
There would still be truths within value pluralism.
Yeah.
It would still be wrong to torture or wrong to pay off the gang, but it would also be right to save 1 million people and right to help out the people who are struggling to feed themselves.
Kind of how we concluded last time, where the act itself doesn't become right, but because the consequence is right, the act becomes less wrong.
Yeah, it becomes permissible, is what we said. It's not necessarily morally permissible, which would essentially mean it was moral. It just becomes permissible because the end result is the moral result that you're looking for. So it's a permissible action. It's the lesser of two evils action, and therefore you've got your hands dirty. So I suppose under moral particularism, there isn't a problem of dirty hands either, because there's no truth.
Yeah.
But with value pluralism, there definitely is a problem of dirty hands, because it's actually acknowledging the fact that actually there are times when you have to do a wrong thing for a greater good. And that's why you have the value pluralism.
Yeah. It's basically the idea that there are different values that can guide our actions and guide our judgments. And the different values need to be assessed in particular ways. Certain values might have greater weight. So if you think about the scenario with promising to take your kid to the cinema. Now, you've broken the duty. You've the consequence of the action is that you're going to upset your child. But the consequence of not going to your job interview it's a greater consequence if you don't do it. So that should guide your action. And the fact that it brings greater value guides your action.
So where would, say, two people disagreed on which, not in this situation, because it's kind of obvious, but say a more balanced situation where there are two values, one has to be broken for the other to happen, and two people disagreed, is there an objective standard or an external rule set which would indicate which should be put as the primary value, or is it then subjective?
You could consider it objective in the sense that the duties are objective, and the consequence is an objective consequence. So,
as to which values should be placed in which order, that would then become subjective.
It would sort of become subjective, yeah. Cool. But you could argue for sort of the outcome that you're going for would dictate what the values are that you should be going with.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is something that we were talking about before, wasn't it, Joe? Where when we were talking about subjective standards, and if two things appear to be completely identical, then you have to start going down second order, third order, fourth order, and keep on going and going and going until one of them reaches a positive or a negative.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take it that deep, I think at the time we were talking about two charities, weren't we?
Yes,
and
yes,
we were saying, say I had 10 quid a month spare and I wanted to give it to charity, and I'd done a lot of research in charities, and let's say I found two charities that on the surface seem to put all of the money into research. Now, let's say one charity was about cancer and another one was about blood parasites. Okay, it doesn't have to really be what that it was, just the two charities ended up having equal value. They would have an equal impact into the population. So in that situation, is there a right answer of giving £10 a month to one, £10 a month to another, splitting your thing £5 a month, or some other variation? But from what we can see on the outset was all things were equal. there was an equal chance of anyone experiencing, let's say, the blood parasites or the cancer. I know in this particular instance, cancer is obviously far more prevalent. They were just the things that occurred to me whilst I was talking out my arse. But with whatever these two conditions happen to be, they're completely equal impact, and I think they're both right to do. My gut would be, well, split it 50-50. But what we then discussed was, well, hang on, let's have a look at how they go the next step further down. Now, most charities
and because
have
also
people
splitting
walking
it
on the streets.
50-50, I think one of the things we addressed was then, as you're splitting it 50-50, you're giving less to somebody who needs it, which,
Yes.
from an emotive standpoint, seems worse.
Exactly, and we also addressed the fact that if I gave 10 quid to this person, that might actually cure one person a month, whereas if I gave 10 quid to this charity, that might not cure anyone. That might actually only go to 1/10 of a person a month. So it's going to take most of a year for me to have the same impact with this charity than to have an impact with that charity. And if we actually put enough money into this charity, eventually we wouldn't need this charity anymore, and then we could focus on that one. And there's so many different factors that you can do it. And you're right, it's how many orders do you go down? And that's one of the problems with consequentialism, I find, is the fact that the order of consequences, because if we go down the lines of the trolley problem, okay, the first order consequences, say 5 to kill 1. That is first order consequences. That's what you do because you have no knowledge of the situation. But then you take the second order and, oh, actually, the 5 people that you've saved are all rapists and murderers who are going on to kill other people, whereas that one person happened to be someone who was working at curing cancer. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, fuck. But you add context into these problems and you suddenly get a bit more. So with a charity, you'd have to, if you had a limited amount of funds to put into these things, actually consider what your money could do for the charity. So, the people that are working in the charity and how much of the people get paid and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Yeah, other action guiding principles in that situation could be something like, that more people will be giving to charity X than charity Y. So you could split the money in order to try and redress that balance.
What would we say from a purely moral standpoint if you used personal experience to sway that judgment? So say I gave £10 a month to a cystic fibrosis charity because my daughter had cystic fibrosis, whereas actually that £10 a month might actually do a little bit more for a different charity.
Under value pluralism, you would value the cystic fibrosis more because it would help your child more and it would bring more value to your life. So it wouldn't necessarily be immoral to focus strictly on that one because that's what you value.
But objectively speaking, the other charity would be more benefited by my money. So from a non-personal level and a wider level, objectively, I would have been doing the wrong thing.
Not necessarily.
No?
No. If you think about it this way, you giving to the cystic fibrosis helps your child, which helps you, which allows you to bring more value.
And
Okay, yeah.
adds value to other people who suffer with cystic fibrosis as well.
Yeah. And if the amount of people suffering from cystic fibrosis is less than sort of the amount of people suffering from cancer, or the amount of people who perceive cancer to be more of a focus, then you are sort of redressing a balance. People might throw £2 in the cancer charity because most people know somebody who has or has had cancer. So they throw their
And
£2 in that. Yeah. But with cystic fibrosis, it's less prevalent.
Yeah.
So there's
less prevalent and less well known. You get adverts for cancer awareness on TV. I've yet to see one for cystic fibrosis.
Yeah. So you're sort of redressing the balance by giving to the cystic fibrosis. It might be more personal, but that's why it needs to be redressed. So that's where you value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting, actually, because we could even say it that on a wider scale, that actually more people who do happen to donate to cancer charities, etc., ought to actually be spending a little bit of that money on things like cystic fibrosis and even other less known things that medical conditions that happen to people, or even well-known things that don't get the attention that they deserve, like some form of mental health issue.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see actually what the kind of split is between donations to different physical diseases compared to mental illness.
Yeah.
I put that in air quotes because mental illness is largely due to the brain and your brain is physical. So, sorry, but mental health issues are physical illnesses. And I really don't like that distinction, but it's the one that's commonly understood. So,
yeah, but equally, I mean, if we throw it the
normatively
other
speaking,
way, if we throw it the other way, though, there are points of mental states that are not necessarily wholly physical in themselves anyway. So there is a distinction that you can make between the two of them if we're being incredibly pedantic, which we tend to be.
And it's largely down to the firings of synapses and hormones, which are still physical.
Yeah, it can definitely be explained through physical terms, and you're correct in that point of view.
But yeah, my point was I would like to see what the proportionate breakdown is between different physical things like cancer and cystic fibrosis or cerebral palsy or any of the others, and a direct comparison between that and mental health issues, because I have seen some adverts for like suicide awareness and things like that now.
Yeah,
which I don't think existed 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's definitely more prevalent than it was before, which is great. It absolutely is. I don't think I've seen any of the adverts and things that has necessarily appealed to me. I find them a little bit cringe, personally, which turns
how
me
bad
off
an advert is
Sorry?
sort of dictate. Should how bad an advert is turn you off donating to a particular charity?
Oh no, not donating.
Oh no.
It's more the so like when you have like the suicide awareness ones where they give you like the number and things like that, and a lot of the mental health issues. Oh yeah, just give us a call and talk things through and all of that. And I just think, and I watch them and I find them incredibly cringy, and I think I really hope they help people who need that conversation, but from the way they're presenting themselves, it makes me feel like they're not going to be able to help me, and that they don't necessarily know what they're going on about. And I think that they've almost done an advert in the way that an advert to sell something rather than an advert to explain what people need.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my perception of it.
I mean, at the end of the day, especially when it comes to suicide awareness, if that really cringy advert goes out and it costs them £1 million to produce it and put it on TV, and only one person gets the help to phone the number, fine, it was worth it.
Oh no, definitely, I'm with you there. One is better than none. You
Yeah.
are definitely correct. Unless the advert actually convinces
Took funds from
people to
elsewhere.
not. Well, no, yeah, no. Unless the advert convinces people to not actually get help. They were thinking about getting help, and they saw that advert and went, "Oh no, I don't want help."
Yeah, I suppose that's possible.
But you could also look at it this way. If they make an advert that's too flashy and too good, people will complain and say, well, they're just going for the aesthetic and they're not really interested in helping people or getting it spoken about.
Yeah.
Whereas if they make a cringy advert, people might start talking. They won't judge it harshly for wasting money, but they might discuss it in terms of how cringy it is. And that
Yeah.
creates a conversation about the suicide hotline.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I'm on board with it.
I mean, it's a whole thing with advertising, isn't it? Is some of the best adverts for products are ones which they never even mention the product. It's got nothing to do with the product. It just sticks in your mind so much because it's like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah. And then you ask somebody else, did you see that advert? What the fuck was that? And the product still gets mentioned.
I mean, I swear to God, I will be on my deathbed in decades' time going, Crusher, I want some Crusher. It's tough enough to make milkshake. That is going to be in my brain until I'm dead.
I download all my TV, so
animate. Oh, that was decades ago. Little animated cats doing dances.
No, I remember the Crusher adverts, and bearing in mind, I haven't actually watched terrestrial TV for 15, 20 years. So yeah, and I still remember that advert. Yes. I should probably catch up on the chat because we've been blathering on for a good 25 minutes without addressing anything. So, sorry?
What's new? That's why people come here.
Yeah, they like hearing us prattle on about random shit.
We did address value pluralism quite a lot, which is in the title. So
yes.
Hopefully people were expecting that bit.
And you know what? There's probably still more we can address from value pluralism, but I don't think that we should ignore what people are saying in the chat at the same time. So 3 Rusty Nails says, God does not exist. That's my moral belief. But Leon says, I don't think it is a moral belief, but it definitely does influence your morals. I agree with you there, Leon. So if you believe a God exists and God has given you your morals, then therefore you're going to ascribe to some form of divine command theory. But if you believe God does not exist, then you're going to have to find your morality a different way. So I'm completely with you there. And 3 Rusty now says, so if it influences my morals, then it becomes the drive to make morals from morals. Sorry, Dave, did you want to say something there?
I was just going to say the existence of something is neither moral nor immoral. It's just a proposition. It's just something that exists. Morality isn't about something that exists. It's about the state of something or the actions of something and how it affects people. So God's existence wouldn't be moral, but how he treats people would be a question of morality.
Regardless of whether he exists or not, whether you believe he exists or not will also then go on to influence your morals.
Yeah, the belief itself wouldn't be moral, but how it dictates your actions would,
So with God, it doesn't necessarily matter whether it exists or not, but your belief in whether it exists or not then does become more influential.
Yeah, but the belief itself wouldn't be a question of morality.
No, yeah, that's what I mean.
The conversation after that actually sort of represents what you said, so I won't read that bit out. But next,
okay. Sorry.
No, perfect. It's fantastic that your thoughts line up with what was going on in the chat, and it saves me reading out. Which, you know, being dyslexic, I have enough trouble reading stuff out live on air as it is. So, you know, thank you for saving me from that pain. Bearded Heretic, hey, how you doing, Luke? Nice to have you here. He says, how we doing? Sorry I'm late to the party. Is there an after party? An after party? I'd love there to be an after party. If I could guarantee that the wife was asleep, I'd have another mix after the party. But I can't guarantee that. Opie says, "Could you explain how existence is amoral? Do you subscribe to some moral realism?" Oh God, let's not go down that route.
It's essentially what we just addressed, wasn't it?
Yeah, essentially. OP says, "Is everything that exists a moral proposition? Moral realism states that moral propositions to be truth at." Only states. That's an interesting one, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, you could argue that the existence of a woolly mammoth now would be a question of morality. Its existence wouldn't be the question of morality, though. Is bringing it back into existence moral?
Yeah.
And if you believed in some form of moral realism, then you would be arguing that there is an actual moral truth to be had there. So, as Opie says, it's a truth app statement, but it's a truth app statement surrounding actions to do with it rather than its existence itself.
Yeah, and I think there, I mean, with his statement of "is everything that exists a moral proposition?" I mean, I'd say no.
No.
As you said, I mean, a baby gets born. Is that a moral proposition? You could look at it through the form of antinatalism.
Yeah.
But
again, that's not the baby's existence being a moral question. It's bringing it into existence is the moral question.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd say no to that. There is a lot of questions of morality about everything that happens in the world, but not everything in the world relates to morality.
Yeah, morality is generally about actions and duties and consequences and things like that, rather than just the tree exists. That's not a moral question.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. So the conversation carries on much in the muchness. Bearded Heretic says they focus on depression as well. Basically, no mental health advertising talks about psychosis and bipolar. So just for reference, Bearded Heretic is a mental health professional, so he would know what he's talking about in that sense. And you're right, there is a focus on depression and things like the suicide hotline and all of that.
I would have a question regarding that. Is I don't disagree at all, but I thought that psychosis was more a symptom of other mental health issues as opposed to being a mental health diagnosis in and of itself, whereas depression and bipolar and things like that are actual conditions as opposed to parts of.
There's the flip side, though. That, I mean, for example, there was the issue with extensive cannabis use of really strong cannabis causes a form of psychosis. So would you say cannabis psychosis in that instance is a condition? Whoever that is, give him a smack.
Kieran.
Kieran, why are you not listening anymore?
Got his headphones on.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to the show.
Have my headphones on.
Yeah, you're on a delay. Go
on. Perfect. So that's interesting. I'll wait for Bearded Heretic to come back and let us know on that one.
It's a broad statement for a set of symptoms.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there, but I'm not a professional, so I don't know. So he's responded and says psychosis is a detachment from reality, so it equals delusions and or hallucinations. So you could be right there in the sense that it is a result of a condition, but equally it could be a condition in and of itself.
Cannabis deludes me into thinking I can do philosophy.
Cannabis deludes everyone into thinking they can do philosophy.
Wouldn't
Have you
be
not seen
remarkably
Twitter?
surprised if it was the birth of philosophy to start with.
Yeah, I think the same. And a little bit of magic mushrooms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think magic mushrooms was the birth of science. We could go to the moon, man. Let's get there. Let's fly to the moon. Yes. But drugs do nothing good for society. Don't do drugs unless you want to be able to think outside the box.
Or you buy
Or share them.
Carrying on, sorry. Bearded Heretic also said before the statement that he said was dramas and documentaries that accurately portray mental illness and then have, if you have been affected by this, are some of the best adverts. I think you're right. I even remember going back and watching like Biker Grove and Grange Hill and things like that as a kid. And there were certain things that happened in the episode that were incredibly moving, and you didn't know what to do with yourself and you didn't really understand it because you're a kid. And this is sort of these things of, I don't understand this, or this is how I feel, man, and I don't know how to express it because everyone I talk to says I'm an idiot for thinking this sort of thing. And those definitely, like that, whether it's a TV show, a movie, or an advert, or anything like that, that sort of somehow addresses it in a. By the way, if you've had this experience, have a chat with us. I think you're definitely right there. That is a bang-on way to do it. So if anyone out there has actually had questions of things like morality, knowledge, and everything, join into the Fresh stream and we'll educate you as best we can.
I swear to God, though, thinking back of like the days when I used to watch Hollyoaks, I swear they put that statement at the end of shows sometimes just to trick you into watching the rerun of it all on Sunday. So it's like, affected by what? What? Nothing happened. I'm going to have to rewatch the Omnibus on Sunday. I must have missed something. Sell the advertising space.
Right, we've had another statement that seems completely irrelevant to tonight's conversation from someone called Catholic Traditionalist, and they say atheism is foolish. What's the live stream link? Well, if you're here on YouTube watching us, I think you've got the live stream link.
I think he wants a Discord link. It's www. I think he wants a Discord link. It's
www.census.gov.uk.
Well impressed with the new census. Completely irrelevant. Being able to choose gender options and add in your own stuff for sexuality instead of just straight, gay, or bi. I think it's really good. And also being able to get a link or sent out to you so that, say, you're a teenager who lives with your parents and you're not out to them, they'll send you a separate link for you to fill out your own details, and it will supersede whatever your parents filled out for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
None of this shit existed before, and I think that's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, that's progress.
It's definitely better than it was. It's still a bit of shit. Right, I am going to have to say that we've got a lot of comments in the chat that we need to address, but I need to take myself about a minute away because I need the wee, because I've had a lot of bourbon tonight. So I'm going to put things on Be Right Back, and we'll be right back in a few moments. And we're back in the room. I'm sorry for that, ladies and gentlemen.
Before we move on to other comments, though, just want to say that Catholic Traditionalist it reminds me of something I said the other week about a lot of kind of religious people barging into streams that have nothing to do with atheism and challenging people to debate as if they're owed some kind of debate.
No, you're right. I mean, I know all of us are atheists, or at least locally atheist and globally agnostic in your sense, Kriss. So you're right in that sense. We're having a discussion about morality, and we're speaking specifically about philosophical principles such as value pluralism and moral particularism. And we're not addressing atheism. I mean, we have addressed atheism, and if you so wish, you can find Dave and I's justifications for why we are global atheists rather than just local atheists. And in fact, how a lacktheist can justify their position as well. You know,
I know in this particular instance, there is a lot of chat going on about, not between us, but in the chat itself, about belief in God and how that affects morality. So they might not be completely shooting at the moon.
I don't know what's
going
on.
Right phrase?
Why are you being so charitable? I don't know this
Because I'm
behaviour from
lovely.
you. No, you're usually a cunt.
I mean, why they came onto the thread in general, I don't know. But anyway, shut up, I'm nice. In case anybody in the chat has met me before, shut up. And for anybody in the chat who hasn't met me before, ignore anybody who has.
So Opie says, just because morals derive from epistemology and ontology does not mean that they are moral. This is skirting close to an inverse of naturalistic fallacy where oughts are our is. Oh, you sound so clever, Opie. It really sucks that there's someone who really knows what they're talking about in the chat. Use simplistic terms that we can all, understand.
Like supervillains.
But yes, no, I actually agree with you in that sense. There are certain things that we might believe, essentially, are moral or immoral, but actually it doesn't necessarily make them moral. And that's sort of the split between descriptive and normative morality that we're speaking of. There are descriptive statements about how things work or how things used to work, or slavery used to be considered moral. Okay, but does that actually mean it was moral, or do we understand that it was never moral? And I'm of the mind that we look back on it and we can go, actually, it was never moral. They were mistaken. A relativist might turn around and say, no, at the time it was right, but right now it's wrong. Yeah, it just depends on how you work it. I genuinely think that there is some form of truth about morality out there that we're not necessarily there on. I think we will forever move closer to finding what the right answer is. But like both Kriss and Dave alluded to earlier, I am equally unsure that we'll ever get to that horizon. It's almost as if the closer we get to the horizon, the further the horizon moves away from us.
The more and more things we understand, the more and more questions it raises, as opposed to answering.
Exactly. And unless we were big-brained enough to actually have all the knowledge in the universe, we might not ever get to that point where we meet the horizon. So whilst I think we can and do have objective morality and there are moral truths out there, I don't know if we'll ever get to the point that we go, yeah, this is definitely it.
It's sort of like going to university. The more knowledge you gain, the more you realize you don't have any knowledge at all.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, my experience with everything I've ever looked into is the more I've looked into it, the more I've realized I don't know about the topic. Flip side of that,
which is good.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
it definitely is.
That's a
different.
good thing, because otherwise you end up in a state of Dunning-Kruger where you
You think
know
you know
just
everything.
enough to think you know everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that is the general problem of pretty much everyone. And to be fair, every single one of us, even the three of us included in this stream, will constantly be affected by both the Dunning-Kruger syndrome and, Dunning-Kruger effect and imposter syndrome. It'll hit all
Right.
of us all the time. And they're, as long as we're aware of it, I think that's the thing, it's the awareness of the matter. So if we think we know something, we should test that. And that's why we get into groups with people who think differently to us and test us. And we're open and aware of the fact that we might be of a different position to someone and maybe we can learn something. I mean, if you take a combative approach, you won't be in that forward thinking mindset. You won't be going and looking for the truth. But if you're actually interested in a conversation and you find someone who's willing to poke holes in your argument, but in a respectful way, it's the best way to learn something. For example, in fact, with both of you, we're quite often in a similar position with things. We might not always think the same way with everything, but we're quite often in a similar position. But when we're of a different position, the pair of you will both go, yeah, but what about, but what about, but what about? And for me, that gets me thinking about other things that I hadn't considered before. Because you know what? We can't always think about it. We saw it happen on last Tuesday's stream when Luke brought up the riots about Sarah Evershed. And I was like, yeah, but they were told not to do this. And then you guys turned around and went, yeah, but what about, but what about, but what about? And there we go. We were in that situation where I went, actually, there were these factors that I actually hadn't considered in this situation, and what you've said there has convinced me of another opinion. And even last week, I was like, I still don't know what I think. But having had a week to think on it, I'm in agreement with you guys. And you know what? Someone else could turn around and give me other arguments, and you might sway me the other way, or you might reaffirm my position. I don't know, but I think that's the way we need to be with these sorts of things. Yeah. I don't know how that evolves.
Entirely.
Sorry?
I agree entirely. If you close yourself off to a discussion, you stagnate.
Definitely.
And what's the point? Especially if you're interested in things like philosophy and morality and all of this kind of thing. Surely the entire point of that is to not stagnate.
Yeah.
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 The
And
entire purpose of it all is to learn and grow and develop and keep on doing that on and on and on.
Give it a couple of years ago, I thought morality was wholly subjective. You know, I did. That's what I
A
thought.
couple of years' time, you will again.
Maybe I will learn something that will put me back on that path. But I can tell you, the knowledge I have where I thought morality was wholly subjective was not enough to actually justify that position as the way it is. And my position right now, where it's more complicated than being subjective versus objective, and there's more elements to it, especially when you take a descriptive versus normative approach, and I've got so much more shit buzzing around my head now that makes me go,
Yeah,
it's just
that's something that we disagreed about a lot for a few months, didn't we? And now we're basically on the same page.
Yeah.
I just don't think that it's possible for it to be normative.
Yeah.
That's basically our only disagreement with it now.
Yeah. But I think you'd agree that we're aiming for that normative approach, even if you don't think that we could ever get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Just because we're on stream, but I'll cunt you for it later.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, you could always argue it's kind of like free will, where it doesn't exist, but it's better to behave as if it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, also valid.
And I definitely agree with you on that one. I can't wait to do another free will episode. I mean, you know, our free will podcast, that is something that really influenced me to look more into free will And I mean, the article I did a little while ago, it's fucking long. It's fucking long. It's probably one of the longest articles I've written for Answers in Reason. It sent
And you've
Dave to
written a
sleep.
lot.
I have written a lot, and it managed to send Dave to sleep, and Dave hasn't slept for months. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's something that I find with free will, it's one of those things that we're probably never going to have an ultimate answer to either. You could argue for morality in the same way. I think we're closer to an answer on free will than we are on something like morality, though.
And like the discussion that was going on in the Facebook group, but it depends on quite what you mean by it versus determinism, and what kind of level of determinism you think is real or relevant.
Exactly.
Like when we did the podcast on free will, I don't believe there's free will, because the choice you would make in that situation is the choice you would always make, because that's the influences and information you had at the time. So it wasn't a free choice. It was determined by other things, but that doesn't mean I think that because Big Bang happened, it was a domino effect all the way to this.
Yeah, I mean, through the article that I wrote, and I think it would be nice to address on stream, but I think it'd be nice to address on stream when there's a lot of us here as well. There was something that I've always felt, and it was a purely emotional attachment to it in regards to free will, is the fact that the brain has a sort of X factor. But it was pleasing to me to find out that there are other philosophers out there that had a similar sort of approach, in the sense that they would say that physical determinism doesn't entail psychological determinism. Whilst you can explain your psychology in physical terms, it doesn't necessarily mean something that happens physically will entail a psychological state. Which is sort of what I was going with that X factor. And again, we still don't ultimately know.
And it's whether you actually have any ability to change what that psychological determinism ends up in.
Yeah,
free will
definitely.
Or free choice, or neither.
But we should definitely address this in a future stream, because we're going to go really off piece. We've got a lot of chat to cover off, and I know Dave needs to shoot off shortly. So let's just cover this off. Computer Brain says, I learn a lot when you prattle on. Thank you. I feel that I learn a lot when other people are prattling on and I'm listening. So Bearded Heretic says it's a broad statement for a set of symptoms. Psychosis is a detachment from reality, so it equals delusions and or hallucinations. Drug-induced psychosis, for instance, or schizophrenia, which is a specific psychotic symptom, especially paranoid delusions. So from that perspective, I guess you're saying that, you know, psychosis is its own thing, even though it could be related to another condition. Hopefully that's what you're saying. That's what I've inferred from it. Speaking of which, I mean, I'll address this later on anyway, but Bearded Heretic should be with us in a couple of weeks for a stream with him, discussing consciousness and morality from a psychological perspective. Carrying on with the chat, though. Three Rusty Nail says, I thought I was transported to another dimension during the break. Trump dancing to bongo drums and a head banging cat. Yes. So, in relation to that, I've set up a number of different breaks recently. So before we only had that one track that was playing whilst we were doing the Be Right Back thing. I've set a number of them up that I'm going to surprise you with randomly. That's the one that I set up today. There's one which should allow a media share, so you guys can type in a video that you want people to watch, but it doesn't seem to be working. We tried that last week. There's also an audio playlist which will basically play a number of different tracks. So rather than just one track always playing, that will come up. So I have tried to vary up things. I've also done one which is a video playlist of various highlights that we've done on stream. The only problem there is that some of the highlights that we've done from our streams are, 15-20 minutes long, and realistically we only want the 1 minute highlights. So we are working on things. It's just taking some time to get there. Bearded Heretic says, isn't the Dunning-Kruger effect amazing? I think you're right there. It is bloody amazing. Especially when you realise that you've been one of those people who have actually been under the influence of it for so long and thought you were in the right because you thought you were this big brain skeptic, etc. And realised, no, you're not. But I think it's actually good, and it feels good getting over that Dunning-Kruger thing. I saw an amazing thing on the Dunning-Kruger effect. It was just a meme about someone climbing a mountain and thinking they nearly got to the top, and then suddenly realizing once they got to the top of the mountain there was actually all of this mountain left to travel. And I think that's exactly what it is. People who get to the top at the first peak really think that they are there. They are the shit, man. They know everything about the topic. And if they eventually pass that peak and come down the other side and realize how much there is that they didn't know, there's suddenly this aspect of humility that even if they get to the top of that peak, they will always be questioning, well, is there another peak for me to traverse? Is there a little bit more? Maybe there is. And I think that is one of the most beautiful things about getting over the Dunning-Kruger effect. We're still all subject to it, but the first time you really realize you are in that Dunning-Kruger effect and get over it is a world opener for you, and it makes you realize how much you don't know. The only problem is it then leads to imposter syndrome, where you feel that you're just not good enough for anything or anyone.
There's a way of tricking yourself out of imposter syndrome by thinking that you're not good enough to be an imposter. You laugh. I've used that as a psychological trick, and it was great. But I can't be an imposter. I'm not good enough. Like, wait.
But did it work?
Yeah, for a little while.
Leon, have yourself a good one. Sorry I didn't see you go when you went. Can't wait to have you back. And OPR, you've had to go as well. Thank you very much for your attendance. I hope you found the transmixing at the beginning palatable. It was definitely interesting for me to mix something different. Computer brain, of course I believe in free will. What other choice do I have? Christopher Hitchens. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the common things that's thrown around. It's one of those statements that adds ambiguity to whether we have free will or not, because either we do have free will and we believe we have free will, or we believe we have free will but only because that's a determined choice and we have no other option but to believe we have free will. I know some people believe we don't have free will, but in the sense of that statement, it's assuming that we have free will. It's holding the belief that we have free will. But going, if determinism is true, then he's got no choice but to believe we have free will. And if determinism isn't true, then, well, we have free will anyway. And obviously when I speak about determinism there, I'm speaking of hard determinism, because I think that there is a certain level of a deterministic universe that could allow us to have a certain amount of free will, not necessarily libertarian free will. Fuck libertarians anyway, but libertarian free will is a little bit different. I just wanted to throw in a fuck you to libertarians.
Always good. But also worth noting that the Christopher Hitchens quote, he is obviously making a flippant joke, not trying to make a valid point.
Mm-hmm. I would say the Christopher Hitchens quote is a point about determinism rather than free will. But we can take from that what I just said. Bearded Heretic, cognitive restructuring might help frame that. Oh man, it's been so long since we said that. I don't know what that relates to. I do apologise.
Getting somebody round the head with a stick?
Kieran says, what's the Dunning-Kruger effect? And Luke says, people that aren't skilled in something thinking they know better than the experts. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. Essentially, it came about from an American university and about people about their driving skills originally. And
David Dunning and Justin Kruger, I think it was.
I think you're right there. So it's a lot of people at university felt that they were better drivers than they were. And then there were people outside of university that had gone through university that thought they weren't as good, but they were better than the people at university. And it was because they've had more knowledge and experience that they realised they weren't as good as they thought they were. And essentially that's what it is. The Dunning-Kruger effect is someone without much knowledge or experience, assuming they have more knowledge and experience about a topic than they do. So, say for example, one that I experience quite regularly in business, in financial services, is people thinking that they're an expert in Excel. And they think they're an expert in Excel because they know how to do a VLOOKUP. And a VLOOKUP is considered advanced knowledge within financial services. That's not actually what advanced knowledge of Excel is. It's what people define it as, but there's so much more. I mean, we'd put even that in the beginner stage. People who know a lot about Excel, that is. And VBA and all the stuff that ties into it. But someone gets to that point where they go, oh, I know how to do a VLOOKUP and a pivot table. I've got advanced knowledge in Excel. I'm fucking brilliant at Excel. All of a sudden you go, okay, well, do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do that? Well, how would you approach this situation? And they've got all of these problems where they suddenly don't know all of this information. But you'll also find that they'll get very aggressive in this situation. And this is one of the other things that you'll find about the Dunning-Kruger effect, is the fact that not only will they not have the knowledge, they will almost fight against the fact that they don't have the knowledge.
Frame it in another way, and to dumb it down even further, specifically for you, Kieran. Imagine you're playing Mortal Kombat against Logan and you pull off a 15-hit combo, and then you think, yeah, I can win the World Championships! And then refuse to accept that you wouldn't possibly win, even if watching videos of the world champions pulling off shit like that with their eyes closed and 5 of their fingers broken.
Good way to put it. Very good way to put it. So that's basically it for the end of the comments. And Bearded Heretic says that was to do with the brain versus free will. CBT can use behavior to change cognition. So you're using your enforced behavior to change the way you think rather than the other way around, if that makes sense. It makes sense to me. But anyone who isn't particularly familiar with psychology might struggle with that. But it's a good thing that we've got you on stream in about 2 weeks' time, so that we can possibly go over that in a little bit more detail. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're gonna have Bearded Heretic on in a couple of weeks. and we're going to be discussing both consciousness and morality from a psychological perspective rather than a philosophical one. Now, obviously, we're going to be talking about things, and we're going to be comparing it to the philosophy, because if we don't compare it to the philosophy, then what relevance does it have to anything we've said ever? But it's interesting to know the symbiotic relationship between philosophy and science, even if you regard psychology as a soft science. At the end of the day, it's all philosophy anyway. I love how much that pisses people off. That pisses people off. Fucking hell, I didn't think I'd had that much bourbon, but clearly I have. So, Dave, was there much more on the value pluralism side that we actually need to take into regard?
No, that's basically the basics of it. I mean, I could go on for hours about it and go into great detail, but that's not what the stream is about, really.
No, as we've said a number of times, these streams are generally taking a light approach to the topics that we want to discuss, and if anybody wants a bit more detail on the streams that we're discussing, we're happy to go into more detail. They just need to request it, and we will plan a stream in the future, or they can come on board. So like Opie did a little while ago, and he came on board to tell us a little bit more about naturalism than we would usually present. And we'll do the same with any topic. And that's the same sort of thing like Bearded Heretic is going to do. Who regards psychology as a soft science? I think anybody that likes science. That's
with regards to it being a light touching on the subject, I may well quiz you a bit further on the whole value pluralism thing in chat at another time, Dave.
Yeah, of course.
It seems to be slightly more where I'm leaning than the moral particularism.
Yeah,
but I wasn't really aware of either beyond the first paragraph of Wikipedia.
That's all I know as well. I wouldn't worry.
I will definitely say as well, like I think I lean, if I'm to categorize myself where I sit moralistically, it's definitely in that sort of value pluralism sense. I think, you know, if there is one moral theory to go towards, it's virtue ethics in my opinion. I think it gives us the best results overall, but I think it's difficult. I think it's so difficult for the average person, especially if you haven't been brought up thinking that way. I mean, imagine teaching manners to someone that had never learnt manners, and they're 30 years old, and they suddenly had to learn to eat with a knife and fork in a certain way and chew with their mouth closed and say please and thank you. These are all behaviours that they've never had to do before. It'd be like...
Imagine trying to teach empathy to people brought up in a Tory government.
But
not sorry at all.
No, I don't think you should be. I don't think you should be. But I mean, in that regard, it's sort of where we should aim for with virtue ethics. It's definitely the ultimate end goal. But because we're not taught it at a certain age, as in a young age, where it becomes habitual, I think that value pluralism is where we almost need to be now, but with the thought that we need to teach virtue ethics to the kids at a younger age. You know, like,
and you can still use those virtues as your measures within value pluralism.
Exactly.
Yeah, they could be action guiding principles.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And I think that we'd end up with a much better society, a much better way to live, a much better way to be. Basically, everything would be better. I'd hope it would be. I mean, could you imagine a society that considered morality as much as we do on the streams where we consider morality being worse than society is now?
No.
I can't. I mean, I can see times where people might be stuck of, should I do this or that? There are certain situations where you don't know what you're going to do, but think about general life. There are certain situations where you get stuck anyway. You don't know whether you should do A or B because you feel a certain way about A or B. So
I suppose if the question is just, could society be worse if morality was considered a lot more? Well, there were the fucking Dark Ages where divine command theory and the morality from that was considered a lot more, and people were burnt at the stake and tortured a lot more. So, yes, it could be worse under the wrong set of moral theories.
Yeah.
Do
Just
either of
don't-
you... Sorry, go on, Dave.
Just never go full cheaty. That's all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right there. Do either of you think that there is... I mean, don't use value pluralism or moral particularism as a cop-out in this particular essence, but do you think that there is a particular moral theory that would result in the best outcome over others?
Probably virtue ethics, just because it's a grounding, and at least it's a start. And it can guide actions, even if maybe not give us the best judgment of all actions.
Like I was saying, I would say value pluralism, but with the basis of your values being virtue ethics.
Oh yeah, it's only because he said not to say value pluralism, but I am a value pluralist, so
Yeah. No,
Yeah, I just thought, fuck Joe.
good call.
Bearded Heretic, nice to see you, dude. I can't wait to have you on stream with us in a couple of weeks. I think I would agree in that regard with both of you. I think virtue ethics, if we were to look at just one moral theory, is the way to actually live our life. And if we were to consider it a little bit more in detail, value pluralism is the way to go. I think that without realizing I was a value pluralist, I am a value pluralist. Because
Most people are.
I fit that definition. I think I had a misunderstanding before the stream that moral particularism and value pluralism were basically two labels for the same thing. Because they do have similar attributes.
There's a Venn diagram there, but it's not a full circle.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They cross over. So when someone would say moral particularism, I'd think, well, that's the same as value pluralism. And I fit into that realm of value pluralism, even though I wouldn't necessarily identify as a value pluralist. I would realize that all my views and values fit into that into that diagram. I realize that they do. So essentially, I am a value pluralist. And I do think that we should look at virtue first as well. But I don't think that necessarily looking at just virtue will tell us everything that we need to know.
Agreed. Sometimes you've got to be a consequentialist.
Yeah, life's more complicated than virtue. Life's more complicated than consequences. Life's more complicated than rules. That's why we need to look at all of them. Number of different values. What do we call that?
Confused.
Also known as value pluralism.
Multiplism. It's different.
Yeah.
There's an overlap. But
Right. Just before we go, is there anything left in the chat or anything left on you guys that we need to discuss tonight?
We've been through all chat and we've covered as much as I was hoping to.
And more,
Next one.
actually. I think that we covered more of the conversation tonight than I thought we were going to. I thought we were going to have to extend this into another episode, but I don't think we necessarily do unless people have questions on the the rewatch. So absolutely fantastic. Thank you everybody who participated tonight through the chat. So Bearded Heretic, Guest Bard, Intrigued Feline, Clever Thunderstorm, Flesh That Thinks, OP, Essentially Leon, Philip, Three Rusty Nails, Catholic Traditionalist for a random little interjection there. I still thank you, because objectively your participation is better than no participation. Did I say Intrigued Feline? I don't know if I did, but I've said it again.
You did.
Oh, I did. Okay, well, you get 2 thank yous, like Intrigued Feline. There you go. The second thank you is for the fact that you've corrected a number of my articles for weak grammar. Philip and all the others of you, especially as well, all of you out there that have decided to watch live or are watching the restream. And you're just, joining in and you're just saying, hey, these guys are fucking weird fuck ups. Thank you so much for joining in.
And you're not wrong.
No, objectively so. But honestly, I really enjoy these streams. I really enjoy the audience participation as well. I wish there was some way that we could actually find to get the audience participation at the same time as we're discussing things. But there are times when things go on. Oh, and Jeremy, you joined at the beginning when there was all the music, but I think you had to go just before we actually got into the meat of the topic, so I do apologize. But Jeremy, thank you so much for tuning in for the first time. I hope you enjoyed things and the cat headbanging to the music. Yeah, thank you so much. And obviously Thursday we're going to be discussing the difference between knowledge and information and the different uses of the word know, which oddly today has been compounded by a number of conversations about people and their disposition towards what knowledge actually is. So before we start the stream, we might address a few of those if I've got time to sort that out. And then the following Tuesday is actually our end of month free for all. So what we mean by that is we've given out a number of links to our Discord server, and I will give out another 5 invitations through next week's link for folks to come and join us on stream. And there is no real requirement other than you're here to have a chat. I'm going to have a mix probably before the stream, but maybe even during the stream. And we'll have a bit of a chat and we'll just go from there. That's it. That's all there is. It's going to be an AMA type thing. So from March this month, the last stream of the month is going to be, let's just have a chat about any old shit. Then the Thursday is going to be our article reading. So we tend to do an article reading or a video review. We actually don't have one for that slot. So any submissions would be really useful. So this Thursday we've got one, but the following Thursday we don't. And then the following Tuesday we're going to have Bearded Heretic on stream with us to have a discussion about both consciousness and morality from a psychological perspective. So not speaking about the philosophy, speaking about the psychology. So we will be having these discussions about things that we think about a lot, but actually having someone here who knows their shit from a scientific perspective, basically. I hope every single one of you has enjoyed tonight's stream and found something useful from it. If you haven't, I do apologize. At the end of the day, if you already know this shit, then hopefully you find our blather somewhat funny, and if you don't know this shit, hopefully that you've learned something from it. I really enjoy doing these streams, and not just because I get to have a mix beforehand, just because these are the topics that interest me. They're the topics that inspire me, especially when it comes to something like morality. I think it's so important for society. It's so important for the world as an entire society, as a species, as multiple species. So it's very interesting when someone decides to say, well, do you want a psychological perspective on it? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I definitely do. So I can't wait to hear from Bearded Heretic in a couple of weeks. But that's it for tonight. Do you guys have anything you'd like to add?
I'm good.
No? Well, in that case, we're done for the night. So thank you very much, everyone who has joined in tonight. I'd like to say thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Dave, for your participation. I'd like to say thank you to all of our active people in the chat room. I'd like to also say thank you to everybody that has watched this stream and will watch this stream in the future. But we are done for the night. So thank you, everybody. You have been watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show, and I'm Joe.
I'm Dave.
Kriss.
And our usual streams are 8 p.m. GMT on Tuesday and Thursday, though we may have others and there may be alterations. Have a good night, all.